Good morning, all of you, and welcome to the online workshop on space dynamics today. I am Jayan Ganguly. I am working in Regional Science Center and Planetarium, and every week every year actually we conduct this Space Week program, and in that Space Week, one of the program we deliberately keep as space dynamics. I hope all of you can hear me. Let it be a more interactive session.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Yes.
good. So,
Yes, sir.
good, very good. So, I saw from the profile of the participants that it is a mixture. A lot of people are there from high school level. A lot of people are there from college, and others are also there. So maybe something may be very silly for some of you, because if I go on speaking at a certain level, what will happen is that others will not get into it. So this is just an introductory session where we would like to actually give a taste of what is celestial dynamics. Okay, celestial or space dynamics. So obviously we will start with certain preliminary things, and it will be an interactive thing in the sense that you have to say me what all you can do. I will be using slides, I will be using whiteboard, and so on and so forth. So let us start, isn't it? Anything before I start? Anybody wants to ask anything? We will have one more query session before we conclude, but before we start, any queries regarding this particular theme or topic or whatever, anything comes to your mind? What is space dynamics? What does come to your mind? Can anybody say me openly? You can keep your videos on for the time being, and you can also keep your mic on. So can we get the grade of all the participants so that I can see? Yeah. So let us have a brief introduction. I will just put it in that particular thing. Yeah. So all of you can open your videos. So I can also see most of you who are there in the screen. So can you open your videos? Yeah, so that we can see, and it becomes a more live interaction than actually I am speaking to a computer and I don't know who is listening to me and who is not listening to me. So that becomes a really tedious thing. So okay, let us don't feel shy. There is nothing. You can just open up your computer's camera and unmute your mic. Okay, a few of you have done it. I want many more, all of you to do it. Okay, so that it becomes really a lively session. Okay, now speak out. What do you understand by actually? What do you feel? What should be expected from a session of space dynamics? Anything what comes to your mind? Don't bother about good, bad, correct, wrong, or anything.
I think it will be about how we transport in space.
How we transport things in space. Maybe one rocket will take something and transport something to space. That is your concept of space dynamics. Okay. What is your name?
Anandan.
Anantan. Good. So Anantan has said something. That is good. Yeah, part of it is correct. Anybody else? Come on, start. You should not.
So space is all about that we are discovering all facts about how we came up here and what are the universe and what is the Big Bang theory and all.
Yeah, that is going too far. Universe, Big Bang, black hole. If you say, then everything comes under. So everything we are more concerned in this session. We will not speak much about astrophysics, astronomy. So for that, some other session we have to arrange. But in this actually we will speak about dynamics, dynamical system. What is a dynamical system? How to analyze the dynamical system? We'll come back to it. Okay. Any other thoughts which come to your mind before I start? Anything? Nothing? Okay. So we will do one thing. So we will. So keep your keep a count of your whatever it comes to your mind. Keep it in the chat box. You can always ask, or you can interrupt me and ask some questions. We will answer it. Or if I feel that some answer can be given at the end, I will keep you waiting up the end. So that should not be a problem. So let us start. Okay. So let me start presenting the way I. So I will come here and come to slides and move front. So can all of you see the screen? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So you saw
Yes,
the
sir.
all of you saw the
Yes,
title screen. Yes. So so we will be discussing about space dynamics, and all of you have some idea something about this. So before we see
5,
something,
4,
let us
3,
see a small
2,
clipping. All of you can hear
1,
the audio
0.
of the video.
इस समय आप अपने स्क्रीन पे देख रहे हैं 2 S-200 रॉकेट
plus 5 seconds.
दोनों का प्रज्वलन हो गया है और उससे 640 टन वाले मार्क 3 रॉकेट नौकन को ऊपर की ओर लेके जा रहे हैं
We have a liftoff. We have a liftoff. A perfectly normal liftoff. S200. First stage performance.
I think that's all.
यहाँ पे काफी थिक क्लाउड थे वो छिलका हुआ हमारा रॉकेट बढ़ता जा रहा है और जो अपने पैरामीटर्स में देख रहे हैं
Okay. So, what do you feel? Wow, what has happened? You have seen a small session yesterday. You have heard about rockets and satellites, and I hope that you understand how this rocket has moved. Can anybody just give a small, brief explanation of how this rocket moves up? What are the principles involved here? Can anybody just? You need not open your video and all. You can just speak out. Can anybody? Yeah, which? Yeah, start. Start with your name, because I can't say. I have opened the slide. No, I can't see your name. So you can say that I am so and so, and then you can start. Okay, start. Somebody was speaking, no?
Sir,
Yeah, tell.
I am Anandan. The rocket burns the fuel and the oxygen, sir.
Okay.
And some hot gases
Yeah.
which are produced at the nozzle
Yeah.
and which provides gas.
Yeah. But why does the rocket moves up?
Because of the opposite reaction.
Opposite reaction. So where is the action and where is the reaction? Can you just do you know it about? Who is giving the action and where actually the reaction is occurring?
The rocket produces the reaction when the hot gases are released.
Very good, very good. Rocket produces the reactions. And which principle this follows?
Newton's third law.
Very good, very good. So that was a good explanation of how this rocket moves. So this is one aspect of dynamical system, that something is moving, and analyzing the motion of this system is one of the prime agenda which is a part of this particular subject. Okay, so we in this subject actually we will not be bothered about how the gases comes out and what makes oxidation and all those things. We will see the motion aspect of it. So we'll come back to it. Wait, and let us see one more video. So you are seeing this video as what do you understand from this video? Can anybody tell me? You are saying something is moving around the earth, isn't it? So what do you feel from this video?
There are some satellites.
Yeah. So anything else can you say apart from they are from satellites? What type of orbit they are following mostly? Apparently seen.
Some solar orbit.
Yeah, I didn't get it. Some
Some of them are in polar orbit.
polar orbit. And what about others? Okay. And what else can you say from this picture? From this video? See, in orbit actually we are seeing that satellites are revolving and they are appearing at a certain period, and period is mostly as we didn't measure it, but it appears that it comes mostly in a uniform way, in a particular period is constant, isn't it? So those things we will be seeing at it. So yeah, so preliminary is what we will discuss before we start into the notion of discussing today's dynamical system, is that we will have something, because it is a heterogeneous group. Some of you may know all these things, some of you may be studying it for the first time, so you should be introduced in a proper way. So we will just spend few minutes in all these things, and then we will go to the core subject of it, because it will involve certain of these concepts. So let us start with motion. So what do you understand by motion? Can anybody tell me? Motion, you can write it in your if you want, you can just write something in your chat box also. So or you can simply say, that is more easy for me. So what do you understand by motion? What is the difference between the concept of rest and motion? Anybody?
When object is moving,
Yeah.
then it is in motion.
When object is moving, then it is in motion. Okay, moving means any type of motion. No, it can move in a line, it can move in a curve, it can move faster, it can move slower. So now, what is uniform motion? Anybody?
Sir, there is no change in velocity.
There is no change. Can you, without using the concept of velocity, can you explain the motion, uniform motion? By
Sir, it is
time and space parameters.
So it will change the position with respect to the time and
No, it changes this position with time, that is fine. But then uniformity comes in which way?
Sir, it reaches equal distances in equal intervals of time.
Correct. It covers equal distances in equal interval of time. Okay, so that is one fundamental thing which you will understand. Second is that accelerated motion. So then the concept of velocity comes. What is a velocity? Velocity, so before that, motion and all I will just give you, because I have not written those things. There is a difference between something called as a distance and something called as displacement. So what is the thing is that if you take 2 points in a plane, you have multiple paths to move to the point A to point B. We will see in the board multiple paths we have. So in that case, actually the shortest way or the shortest possible distance in a plane, or it can be defined in a curve also, but that parameters are different. In a plane, what do we do is the shortest distance between 2 parts is called the displacement of that particular part. So that we will that we have to keep in mind. And then we come to the concept of velocity. Velocity is something that, what is the difference between speed and velocity? Speed, we know that it is a ratio of distance covered by time taken, and velocity is what? It is a displacement by time. Okay, so shortest possible. So that is, so speed is so these types of quantities which has a direction and as well as a magnitude, these are called vector quantities. So velocity, since displacement is starting from one point and ending at another point, it is a shortest path. So in a plane it is supposed to be a straight line. So this is actually a vector quantity. And distance means, for example, from your house to school you can go in multiple paths, and all paths have various distances. So they are actually distances. They are not displacement. So when you go in a particular time, you get the speed. So this is the difference between speed and velocity. And then we have the circular motion. The circular motion means, so can do anybody have a concept of what happens in a circular motion if an object is moving in a circular motion? So what are the things, what can you say from that particular aspect? So a particle is moving in a circular motion, or you are say you are putting a stone in a thread and rotating about your finger. So it is moving in a circular motion.
no?
Yeah, yes. So is it a uniform motion or an accelerated motion?
Accelerated motion.
Why you say it is an
Accelerated
accelerated? Why you say it is an accelerated motion? Is the position because whether it is speed is varying, means velocity is varying, or is it varying? The velocities have different values. Is it like that? Or it is because that the direction of the velocity changes at each point. So that also we will clarify. Actually, the direction changes here. When it is a uniform circular motion, it goes due to a certain field. We will see that its direction changes, and that is the reason actually we say that it is accelerating. Now, orbit we have seen, and the time taken for a particular orbit. So these are the aspects, preliminaries from the physics point of view. And now we will just go to the board, and I will just explain you basic concepts which are required for preliminaries of mathematics. So let us go to the board and let us, can you all see the board? Whiteboard, can all of you see?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes. Good. So we normally do mathematical problems, especially when we study physics, with respect to something called functions. Functions actually is something like, it is represented in this way. Can all of you see this? Or should I write it bigger? Can all of
Yes,
you
sir.
see this?
Yes.
Yeah. A function is a mathematical expression. So in a function, actually, this is an expression in mathematical expression. Mathematical expression involving variable x. See, variable x. Okay. It is an expression. It can be any expression, any type, involving some addition, division, and all those things. So this x can be changed at our own will. So this x is called an independent variable. Okay, and this, according to the value of x, this particular function changes, and so this particular function, sometimes it is given a variable, say we can call that y is equal to fx. So in that case, this y or this fx is called a dependent variable. Okay, a function actually is a mapping between two sets. One is called a domain and one is called a range. So this agent or this mapping, which actually maps points of the domain to points of the range, is called a function. So it loosely called, there are very strict definitions of that we will not go into it. So this is called a function, and this is, so we can have functions like, you can have function like, this is a function x by x plus 2. This is a function fx. More simple function is x square, or if a function is that 2 to the power x. These are all functions, examples of functions. Can you all understand this? Any problem is there up till now? Yes or no? Anybody?
No, sir.
No. Good. So now,
No, sir.
yeah. So any problem is there, you can always ask me. So we have seen what is a function. Next we will be using something called, for this particular class, we will be using something called trigonometrical functions. So I will just give you a brief introduction to some trigonometrical ratio for those who doesn't know it. Okay. So we have, in a triangle ABC, right angle triangle, we define three quantities. This is an angle which is given by a notion, in Greek it is a theta, it is called theta. Read as theta. Okay, so we define three functions. A sine of theta. So sine, it is not like sine is something, theta is something. This is a single entity. It is a function. Sine of theta is a function of the variable theta. The sine of theta is given by, if you can put this as hypotenuse. All of you may know, many of you may know, but just for the completion's sake, base, and this you can give as perpendicular. Okay, so we have this one as perpendicular by hypotenuse, that is equal to AB by AC. Similarly, we have cos of theta is equal to base by hypotenuse, that is equal to BC by AC. And then we have tan of theta, though we will not need much of it, I will just give these three definitions. Tan of theta is given by perpendicular by base, which is equal to AB by BC. So this is something which we will require. So there are some values of it, but just understand these are the definition of it. So this is basic trigonometric ratios which we may use. So understand this much. Then one more thing we will use is the concept of one more thing what I will use is the concept of a limit and derivative. So that also is quite important. Limit, L-I-M-I-T. So let us take a function fx. I am not giving you any rigid mathematical definition because this is not a mathematics class. Just to give you a taste of what is the limit, or just to give you a glimpse of how to understand limits. See, a function can be a discrete function or a continuous function. In that case, function discrete means it does take specific values on the number line. Say x1, x2, specific values, x3. For this we have fx1, fx2, fx3 and so on so. So these are discrete values. But then there are some functions which take values at all points in the number line. So those functions, they are defined at all points. They are called continuous functions. Okay. So we will be interested now in continuous functions only. So in this particular function, we have just now said you that this if we call is y is equal to fx. This is the dependent variable. And this is the independent variable. Independent variable, so independent variable are those quantities which we can give assigned values as per requirement, as per our own will. So that is on us to give these values, and accordingly the other value takes up. Now you go on giving a particular value. So let us give x the value so that it is oscillating about a particular point. So let us take the point as say let us take A. So let us, for example, let us take around the point say 2. Let us take the point A is equal to 2. So the points around A is either 1.9, 1.91, 1.889, 1.99, 1.96, like that. These are the point, or 2.01, 2.11, 2.05, 2.16, 2.2. So like that. We can give either of these. So I can approach 2 from either less than 2 side, or I can greater than 2 side. This is just an example. In general, we can put it as A. So in this case, actually, if I put array fx approaches a particular value L, any value. So let L be. So for example, it depends on fx what is L. So let us take L is actually 5. So it comes, if I move from one side, it comes as 4.98, 4.61, 4.95, 4.99, or it can come as 5.1, 5.5, 5.56, and so and so. So you are saying that as this value of the independent variable is approaching a particular value, the value of the dependent variable approaches that particular value. So in that case, actually we say that the function f tends to a limit L when x tends to a. So this is read as tends to. So in limiting terms, tends to. So in limiting term we say limit of fx as x tends to a is equal to L. So this is the definition, basic definition of limit. Okay? Any question? Anybody? Did you follow?
What do we
What? Tell me, ask me. What do you want to ask?
what do we use this?
Yeah, where we will use it I will say you. But I just want you to know that when I say limit of a function as x tends to a particular value and it is L, what is the meaning of that? That's what I have explained here. Okay, limit means, for example, if a function has a velocity which is given by, means a velocity is represented by a particular function of the distance variable. If it is represented, okay, then how can we calculate other things? So like derivative of that, velocity, acceleration, those things will come here. So this is the basic thing, concept of limit. First you understand this, and then we will see one more thing. So having understood what is a limit, I will just introduce to you what do you understand by the derivative of a function, because that also I will be using slightly. Then only you will get the taste of this dynamical system, because if I simply give you the expressions, that may not be very much appealing. In the sense that that will become like formulas. Okay, so that will not do. So now let us define derivative of a function. So derivative of a function is represented as d of fx by dx. This symbol may have been, you might have seen this symbol in your textbook or some books. This is called derivative. What does it mean is that limit of x tends to a can be any number, fx minus fa divided by x minus a. Okay. So as x is tending to a, if fx tends to fa, see in that case fa will become the limit of the function. So this expression is called as derivative of the function. It is also represented as f dash x. Okay, so d of fx. So we don't write fx if we know that a function is f is a function of x. We will not every time write fx. We can write it as d of f by dx, knowing that the function f is a function of x. So this is the concept of the derivative. Okay, we will use only we will not solve any equations. So in the sense that we will not use the answers or the formulas for that, but you should at least appreciate what, when I write dfx by dx, what does it mean? It means that I am finding the differential coefficient or derivative of the function. Derivative means limit of x tends to a, fx minus fa by x minus a. Then you can, if you know the derivative of a function, derivative means you can actually calculate the function itself by inverse process called integration. So we will not go into that details because we will not integrate today. So having known all these things, we will start certain formulations as is required. Okay. So dynamical systems has to do with actually formulations. So we will enter the dynamical systems now before we go into a bit more laws and details. So when we have lot of particles, so somebody said that these particles, so this is moving in this way with a velocity v1, this is moving in this way with a velocity v2, this is moving in this way with a velocity v3. So this changes as per certain function, the position changes. See, A becomes A dash, A double dash, and so and so. This B becomes here B dash. It can be in any particular position, B double dash, and so and so. So that the position changes. How the full position changes to get the value of the function. So all those things we will be trying to address in this particular. So the dynamical system is a system which is in motion, and we want to find out the parameters like velocity, acceleration at any particular time. So if you take the velocity, for example, velocity, how can you define say differential coefficient when I say velocity? So velocity is displacement by time. Imagine an object is moving in a curve. This is a curve. Okay, we will use this. These are coordinate systems. So if you have in one axis you can put x, in another axis you can put y, and if you have the function as y is equal to fx, so you tabulate x is equal to say 1, 2, 3, 4 and so, y is equal to fx, takes the value as f1, f2, f3 and so and so. So x you are putting, fx you are putting, y, and you get this particular curve, and a particle is moving in this curve with a velocity v. So it starts from here, say point A at time t is equal to t0. What is its velocity at a very near one point? Say let us take velocity a at this point A, and this very nearby point v, it is velocity v. So what is its velocity at that point, and if what is its velocity when the point B approaches the point E? So what we want is that the differential coefficient of the velocity, differential instantaneous velocity, what we say. So this is a space change. So we want, in this particular case, we want to find out the dy by dx. Change of y with it. See, if a y is space and x represents time, because x and y are abstract quantities, it can represent anything. So what we want is that change in space, delta represents change. In mathematics we use this symbol, read it as delta. It represents change. Okay, so change in space by change in time. Okay, and how much is the change? We will make it so limiting thing. So that is what we will be using it to for this our formulation. So this is what somebody asked me, that why we require all those derivatives. This is one way of understanding in future how we will use these derivatives. Okay, so having said this much, let us see some more things. You can ask me wherever you feel that some more clarifications are required, either now or at the end. We will be recapitulating all this. Okay, so now since we are back, I will go back to the presentation. Okay, so now we have seen all these things. Integration I have left it for the timing. We can see it if we require it. I don't think in this session we will be requiring that. Okay, so now Kepler's law. All of you might have known this statement, but these are very powerful law for calculating the planetary motion or satellite motion or whatever it is. So these are very important laws. We should understand these laws very well. So as it is written here, see, the first law is that orbit of the planet is an ellipse. We should understand what is an ellipse. I will show you some small videos which will more exemplify what is an ellipse. So orbit of a planet is an ellipse with sun at one of its focus. That is the first law. The line joining a planet and the sun sweeps out equal area in equal interval of time. So that is the second law. Now these are not only applicable for our solar system, it is applicable for any two-body system, in the sense two-body planetary system with a closed orbit like ellipse. If primary body and secondary body, if the secondary body is moving around the primary body under inverse square law, so these things are applied. And third one is that the square of the period of the planet, period is the time taken for completing the orbit, is proportional to the cube of the semi-major axis. So we will understand what are the three more deeply these three laws before we go into the formulation. So these three are actually the pillars of planetary motion, the pillars of celestial dynamics, and you have to do lot of problems to get used to how to apply these laws in physical situation. That is very important. So let us see the Kepler's first law. So this Kepler's first law
Kepler's
says,
first law is very simple and states two things. One of these things is that the orbit of every planet is an ellipse. The law then goes on to say that the Sun is situated at one of the two foci of this ellipse. An ellipse has a property known as eccentricity, which is represented by the letter E and has a value which will be in the range of 0 up to 1. Eccentricity is defined by the relationship between two measurements of the ellipse known as the semi-major axis and the semi-minor axis. These are known as A and B. Circles have an eccentricity of 0 and will have A and B values which are the same and will be the radius of the circle. As eccentricity increases, the ellipse becomes flatter and more elongated, as A becomes much bigger than B. It is the convention that the longer measurement is the major axis. As long as both A and B are known, E can be calculated as being the square root of 1 minus B squared over A squared. In the special case of a circle, both foci are found in the centre. As eccentricity increases, the foci move apart. Both foci will be the same distance from the middle, and that distance, f, can be calculated by taking the root of A squared minus B squared.
okay.
Bye for now.
Okay, so any clarification on first law? It simply says, yeah, tell me. Hello.
What is the in that formula for calculating eccentricity?
What is the once more? What is the? Can you just repeat the questions once?
In the formula for calculating.
Yeah, calculating the eccentricity. That's what you want. Eccentricity is a measure of the flatness of the ellipse. Okay. So eccentricity, there are three types of, basically there are three types of conics. These are a part of something called conic section. I will just do one thing. Before I proceed further, let me go back again to the board. Let us see this one. So we have here so we have a conic, we have a cone. So we have a cone something like this, and we take a plane and intersect the cone. So if we take a plane and intersect it in this way, we have the intersection between plane and cone as a circle. So this is a circle. If you see top on, it will be something like this. If we take the cone and intersect it at an angle, say if we take it like this and intersect it at an angle, the intersection will be something like this one. So it will be, say, you will have something like this one. So it will be more flattened. So this is an ellipse. So if you take this, So this will be something like here. This is an ellipse. And if you take the plane and slice it from this side, so you will get something like this. Okay, so this ink is less. So this is a parabola. So each of these three things, ellipse, have different eccentricity. So the eccentricity is having a value greater than or equal to 0. It can be either equal to 1, or it can be equal to less than 1, or it can be equal to greater than 1. Okay, so there are values of eccentricity for which actually the conic section varies, and basically all these are all, since it starts from a cone, all these curves, this is a circle, this is an ellipse, and we have something like this. This is a parabola. Parabola can be like this, parabola can be like this. These are parabolic orbit. So all these things can be drawn with the help of actually the coordinates, where I'll give an example. For example, if you have it x here and if you have y here, this is the way actually two number lines are represented. And you can have it as an angle 90, so this is coordinate axis. And if you take a point, say not so far, let us take it here, and you take one more line away from the axis. So these are the axes. Either you can have it here or you can take one more line. So if you take a point on this x-axis, say S, at a specific point, so its distance from this S and a perpendicular distance from, this is the variable point, and this is the perpendicular distance from this particular line, which is called the directrix. Okay, this is called the focus. So PS by PM. Okay, eccentricity is defined as PS by PM. So based on the formulation, actually you can get the formulas for ellipse, parabolas. For example, for ellipse it will be x square by a square plus y square by b square is equal to 1. So this is the formula for ellipse, and you have expression where you can get that ellipse eccentricity should be less than 1. So in this way actually you can calculate the various eccentricities, and you can understand, if you get somehow from a particular orbit what is its eccentricity, you will understand whether that particular particle will go in a parabolic orbit, means it came and it goes, then it will never come, it will be very far away and it goes on, distance is increasing. So that is called a parabolic orbit. If it's a periodic orbit, if it is circular, means it will come at a particular, because circular or elliptical are both having orbits of particular periodicity. So this periodicity, how to calculate, that we will show you. So the thing is that if you go around at a particular period of time, then you get the amount of time taken to complete a particular period is called the period of that orbit. So we will calculate all those things. Slowly we will do it. So this is the example of conic. So this was the first formulation, which says Kepler did a lot of fitting of the data of planetary motion as it is observed by Tycho Brahe, and he calculated and he found out that all planets are moving around Sun in not circular orbit. Previously it was thought like that, but they are moving in a flattened orbit called elliptical orbit. Elliptical orbit means it will have an eccentricity less than 1. Okay, so that is the first concept. Let us move on to the second one.
What is the second formula for
Yeah, what is it? You want the formula?
In the video there was a formula
For calculating the eccentricity. Eccentricity b square is equal to a square into 1 minus e square. B square is equal to a square into 1 minus e square. This is the formula. Okay?
okay, thank you, sir.
So with this you can calculate. See, 1 minus e square or 1 e square minus 1 depends on whether e is less than 1 or greater than 1. So let us again move back to the presentation. So we have seen this. Now let us go to the second law. Observe. So, second law says that the planet describes equal area in equal interval of time, and that is quite very important, and we will see how the importance lies. I will see in the subsequent slide, but at least the notion. For example, if I once more replay it, let us not this one. So you can just see that it goes in equal area. So some place in the orbit it has to move faster, and some place it has to move slower, so that it could maintain equal area in equal interval of time. So that is the second law. And the third law, it states that actually we have seen what is the major axis, what is the minor axis. In first video it was shown. If you have not understood, I can show you once more. The square of the time period is proportional to the cube of the semi-major axis. So that is a very important law. For example, I will tell you, see, imagine that we have discovered a new planetary system where all the things are same. Only the thing is that the full planetary system is scaled down by a factor of k. If like that there is a problem, or like that there is a scenario, then what is the period of the planets in that new planetary system compared to our planetary system? So these types of situation, how do you analyze? You analyze using Kepler's third law. Okay, so before moving further, I will just clarify one more thing about this axes. Let us go to the board. So we have this is an ellipse. Okay, and these are the two axes, say x and y axis. This is the center of the ellipse. This is taken as x axis, this is taken as y axis. Say one point here is taken as one of the foci, S1, another point here is taken as another foci, S2, and we have this one, this is the minor axis, labeled as B, and this is the major axis labeled as A. Okay, the point when it is so this is the focus. So sun, for example, sun will be in one of these points. So let us put sun here in, and say planet, this is the sun, so this is in one of the foci, and let us say the planet is here, or the satellite or Earth is here in one of the foci, and satellite is moving in a very eccentric elliptical orbit. So we have the secondary object here, the primary object here. So this position where the object is nearest, secondary, say planet is nearest to the sun, it is called the perihelion position. Perihelion position. Okay. So this is called the perihelion position, and in this case actually, since the object is moving with a velocity v, its velocity we can treat it as Vp, moving, if it is moving in this particular direction. Similarly, when it goes here and it comes back here, at this particular point it is moving down, and you can see that this particular point, this distance is the largest from the secondary. So they say this is x2, if I call x1, x2 is the largest, it can't be larger than this. So that is called aphelion position. This point A, let us keep aphelion position, and its velocity is Va. So this is perihelion position, this is aphelion position. Perihelion, the planet or the satellite is nearest to the sun. Aphelion position, the planet or the satellite is furthest from the sun. So, and it is moving in an elliptic orbit. So this is a very important thing, and in the Kepler's law it says that it has to cover equal area in equal interval of time. So naturally when you make area here, since it is a long strip, this area, and if you take nearby here this area, they may become equal. So but here you see that it is this arc is this is very small compared to short compared to this particular arc. So naturally what it has to do when it moves in this area, it has to travel faster, and when it comes in this area it has to travel smaller. So here it should go faster because it has to cover a bigger arc, and here it has to cover a smaller arc. So this is the importance of Kepler's law. Okay, this dynamically makes a lot of difference. So that we will see it. Again, let us come back to the presentation. Yeah, so these are the things which I was explaining. So this is much better formulation in that actually how eccentricity and the major axis is used to calculate aphelion position. So you can understand that, see, if this is AE okay, and this full for is A, that is the major axis, and this is defined as AE because E is equal to PS by PM. Okay, so in that way you can calculate and find out that it can be shown that this distance is AE, major axis, into eccentricity, and since eccentricity is less than 1, when you multiply a quantity less than 1 to another quantity, in this case A, it becomes shorter. So always this focus distance is shorter. So eccentricity is less than 1 for our elliptic orbit is seen here, and these are the quite important formulation where you find out the radius vector. Radius vector means from the point to the satellite, this from this particular, if the sun is here in this case, this is the perihelion position and this is the aphelion position because sun is here in this particular figure. So nearest position is the perihelion. So what is the what is the radius vector at the perihelion is A into 1 minus C, and at aphelion it is A into 1 plus C. So this you should know it. And second law, as I was telling you about the area, you see this is one area. Yes, in this case actually the sun is here. In previous figure the sun was so it doesn't matter whichever we consider, we have to see the perihelion aphelion accordingly. So in this case S is here and we have this particular area. You can see this area and this area are of same dimension. Quantify if you do both these areas, they are equal in magnitude, but you can see that this is having a bigger traversal arc, but this is having a smaller traversal arc. So here actually the object has to move much faster compared to when it moves in this position. P3 to P4 it has to move slower, and P1 to P2 it has to move faster. Okay, so what does Kepler's law states? Kepler's law states that it traverses equal area in equal interval of time. So this area by this time, so this time say equal interval, equal area, these two are equal area, so these two time travel should be equal. So T2 minus T1 is equal to T3 minus T2, and this ratio is a constant, equal area in equal interval of time, so this ratio becomes a constant. So one thing is there, so this is the basic formulation of the Kepler's second law. One thing is there, if you have inside an ellipse a triangle, geometrically it can be proved that the area of the triangle is given by half into product of the two sides forming the triangle, that is in this case it is SP1 and SP2, and sine of the angle. You know what is sine now? Sine is a quantity defined, so we can abstractly define sine for any particular angle. So that was just a definition which I gave you with respect to right angle triangle, but you need not have always, you can define sine at its value can be used in any particular angle. So half of this product of these two radius vector and sine of angle between them gives you the area of this particular thing. So you can see here, so these angles are represented in radians, because whenever we do physics calculation or dynamical problems, we don't represent the angles in angular measure of degrees, because we will be using the calculus and all those derivatives and all those concepts. So we have to convert them into radians, because trigonometrical ratios has to convert it into radians. Radian means 2 pi corresponds to 360 degree, so it should be always in terms of pi. So in that way, pi by 180 is 1 radian. So we have to express all these radians. So these two angles, since they are PS1 is equal to sine of PS1, PS1. So if the angle, we may write it for a approximation case, we may represent this angle, since they are not ellipses are very big ellipses. The angles are, when we consider these things, let us consider in such a way that sine of angle can be represented by the particular radian measure of that particular angle. So you can do that, because you can show mathematically that this function, when you represent the angle as a measure, sine of that particular measure approximates to that angle in radian degree. So this approximation can be taken, and for very small particular things, if these are very close by, if these are very nearby, in limiting sense if you do, what will happen is that these two can be also considered equal. R1 is approximately very close to R2, and then we have area of the first curve as given as half R1 square theta 1, area of the second curve R square theta 2, and since the time of duration of the traverses are equal, we have this particular formulation that half R square theta 1 by t is equal to half R2 square theta 2 by t is equal to constant. So theta 1 by t is the omega 1, that is the angular velocity. So let us come to the board once again, because it may be a little confusing to some of you. So let us go to the board and let us see this thing once more, because this has to be understood properly. So what we have here is a situation where an object is moving in an ellipse. So this is the center, and we have the major axis foci here. The sun is here, say, and the planet has moved from P1 to P2. Okay, so let us take the P2 for the timing for our use very close to P1 for this formulation. So very close to P1 to P2. So we have this triangle. So let us call this as R1 or small r1 if you want to say, if you don't want to go big R1, small r1, and this is small r2. This is the area. And let us consider here this triangle is P3 and P4. These are the 2 points, and if I join this point with this one and P4 with this one, the diagram is not very good, but don't have any one. So we have this, and let us take this as R3, R4. Okay. Now, as I told you that, see, 360 degree corresponds to 2 pi radians. Okay, so 1 degree corresponds to, or 1 radian, or you can say 1 degree corresponds to 2 pi by 360 radians. Therefore, x degree corresponds to pi by 180 into x radians. So we can convert any angles to radians. Now, for a particular ellipse, triangle inside an ellipse, it can be shown that the area of that particular triangle, area of SP1P2 is equal to half into SP1 into SP2 into sine of angle is P1 is P2. Okay, you can have this triangle angle here, or you can put it in the top if you want, like this. So in this case, you see what is shown here is that, so area of this triangle is this one. What is the area of other triangle? Area of SP3P4. What is the area? Can anybody say me? Half into P. Anybody? SP3. Okay? SP3 into SP4 into sine of P3 SP4. Okay. So we say that these two areas are same. So what does it mean? Area of SP1 P2 is equal to area of SP3 P4. This triangle area are same. So what does it mean? Half of, if I take the SP1 as R1, half of R1 into R2 into sine of P1 SP2 is equal to half of R3 into R4 into sine of P3 SP4. Okay. So when these angles are small, it can be shown mathematically that if the angles are converted to radians, if angles are small, it can be shown that what it can be shown that sine of SP1 SP2, this angle is approximately equal to P1 SP2 when the angle is in radian. When the angle is in radian. Okay, what is radian and all I said you. So if I take the angle here as theta 1 and the angle here as theta 2, let us take it as theta 1, this angle, and theta 2. So we have half R1 into R2 into theta 1 is equal to half R3 into R4 into theta 2. It goes on, any number constant. Then what we said, that these angles are swept at equal interval. So let the time be here T1, T2, T3, T4. Okay. So I can divide area by time is a constant, it is said. Okay. Equal area in equal interval of time. So here one time factor is there. Say time. So we can put here as T2 minus T1. Here also you can put as T2 minus T3, T4 minus T3. So since the time are equal, so we can have T2 minus T1 is equal to T3 minus T4 minus T3 is also equal to T. So we can have this as T and this also has T, and this for any triangle it is same. One more approximation is done is that this R1, since theta 1 is small, we assume that R1 is approximately equal to R2. And since again theta 2 is small, we assume that R3 is approximately equal to R4. These assumptions are done mathematically in dynamical systems and they are quite logically correct also. We can apply like that. So we can do is that half you can cancel, R square, R1 square theta 1 by T is equal to R2 square theta 2 by T. So this becomes a constant. It becomes, for many things you can put like that. Now we have what is theta by T. Rate of change of angle by time is called the angular velocity. Angular velocity. Angular velocity is defined as rate of change of angle. Rate of change of angle. So if an angle is represented by theta and the time to traverse that angle is t, theta by t represents the angular velocity and it is represented by a Greek letter called omega. So you have to get used to all these things. So we have omega. Omega, this is read as omega. O-M-E-G, omega. Angular velocity. So angular velocity omega is equal to theta by t. Okay, rate of change of time, angle with respect to time. So that we will use it here. So we got it here as R1. From here you come R1 square omega 1 is equal to R2 square omega 2 is equal to dot 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 is equal to constant. So that constant we put it as h. Classically in all textbook, in dynamics textbook it is written as h. So this is the definition of K plus second law, which says that R square omega is equal to h. Remember this, we will be using this. Okay. So any questions from whatever we have done or any portion you have not understood? Anybody?
Sir, we can only approximate R1 because R2 is theta is small.
Yeah. When theta is very small, mathematically we can take R1 is approximate because theta is so small that if you increase this by a small amount, it doesn't change much. So we can make that approximation because we are morely interested in the area here. So this area and this area, that is our interest. So this very small means it will not affect our result very much. So these types of approximations are done very much in science. Okay. So you have to make useful approximations, then only you can make calculations easy. So that is also a very important thing when you do solving physics problems. You have to approximate, make appropriate assumptions, appropriate approximations to go through the problem. Okay. So we have, so this is the approximation we make, and we take these two as R1 and R2 as same, so it becomes R square, and then so we are involved, we are interested in areas change with respect to time, so that's what we have done, and R square omega is equal to h is the result. Okay.
So if the theta is large, you have to find
if
a formula.
the theta is large, we will make it into smaller strips because we want to calculate instantaneous change. Theta can be large, but we can always break it into smaller strips and do the problem. Okay. Then we can add all the smaller strips to make the bigger angle. So like that, that is the technique. Okay. So let us go back to the presentation once again. So this R square omega 1 is equal to half R square omega 2 is equal to half can be omitted. So we have this is the one of the ways of expressing second law. And K plus third law we have already given you, that a cube is proportional to t square, and this is the formulation. A1 cube by t1 square is equal to a2 cube by t2 square is equal to so and so. So it goes on. Okay. So that is one thing. Now after this K plus law were proposed, Newton came out and he gave K plus law was somewhat like an empirical law. It didn't give out why actually a particular effect should occur. So Newton came out with a series with three laws, Newton's laws of motion, which actually gave the foundation to all these Galileo's experiment, to all these K plus planetary motion it gives, and we can derive other things from these Newton's law. So there are three basic Newton's law. They are very important, and we should understand this, not only the statement but what it refers to. Okay, so it refers to that, see, any body, unless you have an external agency coming, like a force of some type coming and affecting that particular object, it will maintain its state, whether it is in rest or in motion. That is actually called the concept of inertia also. If you keep this object, if you keep a ball here, it will remain there. Okay, if a ball is moving, it is remember from where that first motion came is not concerned here. It is moving mean if there is no other force, it will keep on moving. Okay, that is the thing. Then he derived means he gave another statement which says that the rate of change of momentum is proportional to the impressed force. So when an object or a ball or an object is moving with a velocity v1 and it changes, its momentum is actually what is the product of mass of the object and the velocity. Mass of the object and the velocity. So if this is referred to as momentum, if the velocity changes, its momentum also changes. Okay. So the time in which the momentum changes, the rate of change of momentum is proportional to the force. An external agency is required to change the momentum. So that is another concept which is forced in. So rate of change of momentum takes place and the direction of change takes place in the direction of the force in which it acts. So from there actually we can derive and include a concept called acceleration, that is rate of change of velocity, where if the mass is constant, mass is not changing in the full system, then we have the famous formula force is equal to mass into acceleration. But the basic concept should be understood. And of course the third one, which is the basic thing in all rocketry science or all these things, that every action should have an equal and opposite reaction. If there is no other external agency, if the system is self-contained and within that system there is an action, there should be an equal and opposite reaction. But the action and reaction always doesn't occur in the same body. For example, a rocket is moving, the action is occurring through the flow of the gas outside and reaction is occurring through the rocket moving upward. Okay, the action is in one particular agency, reaction is occurring in second agencies. They are in a continuous contact, so they actually affect each other. So these are the three Newton's laws which should be understood. And one more law which will be important for our formulation point of view is the Newton's gravitation law. What it says is that if there are two masses, two objects have two masses, then there is a force between the two masses which is directly proportional to the product of the mass and inversely proportional to the square of the distance between them. Okay, and this constant of proportionality is an universal constant for any two mass in the universe, which is not actually in subatomic level. They are actually, though there also this law should hold, but it is predominated by electrostatic force. For any two massive or comparable physical masses, this law is valid. So that is the universality of this law. Okay, so these three are these laws of Kepler's law, Newton's laws of motion and Newton's laws of gravitation form the pillars on which actually the classical space dynamics is rests. Okay, now for now we will so instead of analyzing whether a planet is moving around a particular star or a satellite is moving around a particular planet, and whether there are only these two objects in the system or there are some other forces like moon is moving around earth but earth is moving around sun. So actually it is not only two bodies, there are other bodies also present whose gravitational field can also affect. So before studying this many bodies, which comes under the bigger problem of many body problem, we study an isolated case and then we extend the case by increasing the complexity. It becomes three body problem and higher body problem becomes a very complex problem to be solved, as we will solve. We will not see in today's course, but if you study in further you will see. So we will today concentrate on what is called as a two body problem. Two body means, for example, there is a satellite, there is a planet, satellite is moving around planet, or the planet and a star is moving, the planet is moving around star. Okay, so these are the two bodies. We don't consider they are moving around there with respect to their mutual gravitation. So that is what we will try to establish a general relation, and we will see some of the aspects of that relation. That is the main agenda of today's discussion. So let us go on with that. Again, let us move to the whiteboard so that you can see it. Okay. So we have, let us take the coordinate axis. This is the origin, this is the x-axis, this is the y-axis. So let us take the position P1, point P1. P1's coordinate is x1, y1. What does it mean? That if I drop perpendiculars, if I drop perpendicular from x1, okay, so this is x1, this distance is x1, this is x1, and this one, so if I put it in some other color, this is y1, so this distance is y1, so that is meant by x1, y1. Now if the object, this is first point and it has moved to a point P2, is x2, y2. So we have accordingly here this is x2 and here this is y2, and the distance is between these two. So I'll write once more this line. So we have something like this. So let us call it R. So naturally you can understand that if I drop a perpendicular from P1 to this line, say M, let us call it M, then we have P1M is equal to x2 minus x1. You can see this is x2 and this is x1, so this becomes x2 minus x1. And P2M is equal to y2 minus y1. Okay. So what is the distance R? From Pythagoras theorem we know this is equal to R square is equal to x2 minus x1 x2 minus x1 whole square plus y2 minus y1 whole square. Therefore R is equal to square root of x2 minus x1 whole square plus y2 minus y1 whole square. So we got R. Okay, that is the distance between x and y. And these two P1, at P1 we have mass m1, P2 the mass is m2. So what is the force between from P1 to P2 and from P2 to P1? The force is given by G m1 m2 by R square. So that is the force which is acting between this. Now we know that I have said you that if x represents space, say distance, and t represents time, we have dx by dt, that is change of distance by change of time. So that is the velocity. Okay. Similarly, if we have, so let us say d is equal to dx by v is equal to dx by dt. So we find the change in velocity. What we have to do is that dv by dt, rate of change of velocity, the change in velocity by change in time. Okay. So that is, so if you have to change, means ddt of velocity is what we have already got, dx by dt. So this can be written as d2x. This is a notation, rate of, so this is a second derivative, is called rate of change of rate of change. So d2x by dt square, this is called acceleration in differential form. If somebody is finding it difficult, try to just get a taste of it. It is not that you have to master it just now. It is called acceleration. Okay. So one more thing is that whenever there is a force, just listen here, just see here, whenever there is a force, say F force is there, and if there is a angle that force makes with the x-axis and the y-axis, we can resolve the force. We can write the force along x-axis and along y-axis, so that the resultant is the force. So this along x-axis is called F cos theta, and along y-axis is called F sin theta. And you can see that there is a relation. If you go through all those things, you will see that there is a relation called sin square theta plus cos square theta equal to 1. If you take that formulation and use Pythagoras theorem, you get this particular formulation. So naturally you can understand that F sin theta whole square, F sin theta, let me erase it, F sin theta whole square plus F cos theta whole square is equal to F square sin square theta plus F square cos square theta, that is equal to F square sin square theta plus cos square theta is equal to F square. So you can calculate F from all this. So we have to resolve this force along this and this. Okay. So how to resolve this force along this? We have to take the what is called the component or the direction cosine of this force along and perpendicular. So what is the cosine of this force along? So force, if we take for a particle from P1 to P2, we can take the force as something like this one, G m1 m2 by r square into, if I just delete that, into I will write it in a different color, into this cosine, direction cosine. If you take for example x2 minus x1 by r. Okay, so you have resolved it along this direction. Okay, similarly you can resolve it along upper direction also. You can get another component G m1 m2 by r square, y2 minus y1 by r. So these two resolving, these are product. So these are the force along x-axis, force along y-axis. So force is mass into acceleration. What is mass for the particle from P1 to P2? The mass is m1. So what is the equation? m1 into mass of P1 into acceleration d2x1 by dt square is equal to this one, G m1 m2 by r square into x2 minus x1 by r. Similarly, we have for the mass along y-axis we have m2. For the y-axis we can write it like this also, m1 into d2 y1 by dt square. So we are is equal to G m1 m2 by r square y2 minus y1 by r. So like that we can form the equations for P1 to P2 and for the equation for P2 to P1. In that case actually this x2 minus x1 will become x1 minus x2 and the sign will get reversed. Other things will. So we will not go into the mathematical formulation of all this as such. I will give you the result so that we can after doing certain manipulation, after doing certain calculations and all, we can go on calculating, but then time will not be there because we have to finish. After these things we have to actually get a relation between this one, so that how it changes. The position of P1 changes from x1. P1 is changing. Yeah, tell me. Anybody? Any question? x1 is changing to x2. So we have to find out a relation between x and t. X is change in position, x2 minus x1 and t, time of traversal. So based on all this calculation and manipulation, I will give you the ultimate results which we get is given by d2, this is not working, we have d2x by dt square plus mu x by, we have r cube. You can understand mu is something relating to g, m1 and all those things is equal to a constant, is equal to 0. So this is one equation, and similarly we have the other equation d2y by dt square plus mu x by y cube equal to 0. So these are the two equations which governs the motion of the planetary system, two-body system, as we have seen here. Okay. So if I erase this one, so we will use this system. We have not gone into the algebraic part. That derivation we have just omitted. I just wanted to give you because that will be tedious and will take time. So based on this resolving part, we have this equation, and if you solve this equation, you get the orbit. So orbit is given by this in polar. See, you can have x if you have this concept x, y and p. This is x, this is y, and p is the point, this is the origin. If you join origin to the point, this is the radius, this is the angle theta. If you complete this triangle, so we have, if you m, so you can resolve OP into two parts. We call it as x, this is x and this is y. So x and y can be resolved in two parts. X is equal to r cos theta and y is equal to r sin theta. So these are called the polar coordinates, r theta. See, r theta. So you can convert x, y, that is Cartesian coordinate, to polar coordinate for certain solutions. So these are called polar coordinates. Okay. So we have the solution as r is equal to h by we have h square by mu 1 plus cos theta. So this is an equation of a conic section in polar coordinate. Equation of conic section, conic section, conic curve, whatever we have seen, conic section, which we call conic section in polar coordinates. Okay, so what we found out is that for a two-body problem, for a two-body thing, if we have only consideration for mutual attraction due to gravitation, then we get a set of equation which, if you solve it by using various solving methods, you get a solution which is actually showing that all these orbits are conic sections. They are either parabolic orbit or elliptic orbit or circular orbit or something like that. So they are some form of a conic section orbit. That is the first thing which is proved, and that is actually the first law of what Kepler stated. That is what we did. So now again there is one more equation. So we have, so we will again not, since you are not all familiar with, most of you are not familiar with calculus and this thing, it is a waste of time to actually show the derivations. So we will just write some more thing. If you actually use these equations, you can derive one more equation, and that is called the energy integral. Energy integral equation for orbital motion. So this is a equation which is quite handy. and that is written in this particular form, which is v square, half of v square minus mu by r is equal to constant. So this is a constant, this is a constant. This part is from potential energy part, and this part is the kinetic energy part. Energy part. Okay, so we have an equation which states somewhat like a conservation of energy principle, which says that the potential energy and kinetic energy of the system as a total is constant as the radius depends on velocity and radius. As the radius increases, mu is a constant. As the radius increases, potential energy decreases, kinetic energy will increase. As the radius decreases, what will happen? This potential energy will increase, kinetic energy will decrease. So it goes in that particular way. And this also we have seen when we studied the Kepler's second law. We have seen how the velocity changes. So that is also part of this particular thing. So that is there. And then we can have some simple calculations which are quite handy. So this is one equation that you should know. And then we have
Now kinetic energy is half mg square.
yeah, but m is considered as a unit mass. In this case, we have reduced the equation for an unit mass. You can because when we consider the other thing, when we consider the mass, you can modify the equation accordingly. This is a general equation. Okay, and the mass is considered in that mu factor.
Oh.
Yeah. So now we have some famous equations like v is equal to omega r, velocity is equal to omega r. This is a well-known equation. Omega is the angular velocity, and this is the radius, and this is the velocity. Actually, this is a vector, so these are the is called a cross product. But when it is at 90-degree angle, then the sine of 90 is at that particular position. We can write a v is equal to omega. This is only valid, as you can remember, that when it is moving in an elliptical orbit and sun is here, at perihelion and at aphelion, these angles are 90 degree. Okay. So what this is a general equation. For example, if you have at any particular thing, for example, here its velocity is at a particular angle theta with respect to the tangent velocity. So in that case, we can write this angular velocity. Velocity is a cross product, a vector. It is a product. It is a way of defining the product of two vectors. We will not go into details. This is nothing but modulus, that is the magnitude of angular velocity into magnitude of the radius vector into sine of the angle with a unit vector is that. So we will not go into that details, but just understand that when it is at these two, since the angle is theta, sine of 90 is 1, so we can always write that v is equal to omega r at these 2 points, that is perihelion and aphelion. Okay, so these two, that is one thing. And then we have the Kepler's law, r square omega is equal to h. R square omega is equal to h. So we can write this as, see, v is equal to omega r, and omega r is equal to h by r. Okay, so we can write v is equal to h by r for aphelion and perihelion. So these two are valid. Okay, And then what is the use of all these things? So we have, see, velocity is equal to h is a constant. Velocity is depending only on the radius vector. So what is aphelion? We have previously seen from this one, aphelion, the radius distance at aphelion, at perihelion, let us say, radius distance at perihelion is a minus ae, that is a into 1 minus e. Remember the ellipse, remember the sun is here, point is here, this is ae and this is a, so naturally this becomes a minus ae. Okay, so that is the perihelion distance, perihelion. So we have a into 1 minus e. Similarly, aphelion is here. So if the odd is moving like this, perihelion velocity is Vp, aphelion velocity is Va. Aphelion is here. So Ra is equal to a plus ae, that is a into 1 plus e. So velocity at perihelion is h by Rp is equal to h by a into 1 plus e. And velocity at aphelion h by Ra, h by a into 1 minus, this is 1 minus e, I am sorry, and this is 1 plus e. So velocity at perihelion divided by velocity at aphelion, if you do, you can neglect the h, which is an unknown factor. So if you know one, velocity of perihelion by velocity at aphelion is equal to h by a into 1 minus e divided by h by a into 1 plus e. So this becomes 1 plus e by 1 minus e. Okay, so Vp by Va. So if you know the eccentricity and if you know one of the velocities, you can calculate the velocity at the other point. So that is beauty of this particular formula. So that is one thing. Similarly, you can calculate the eccentricity if you know the semi-major axis and the eccentricity. You can calculate the velocity. This actually, for this calculation you have to know one of these velocities, perihelion or aphelion, and then only you can use. But then you have the other integral equation, that is half v square minus mu by r is equal to constant. Okay, so that is one equation which is handy with us, half v square minus mu by r is equal to constant. So we have, you can see that half v p square minus mu by rp is equal to constant, half v a square minus mu by ra, it is also equal to constant. So both constants are same. So you can always, if I erase some part here, let me erase because it is getting clumsy. So from this formulation you can see that we can eliminate. So we have these two formulas. We have half Vp square minus mu by Rp is equal to half Va square minus mu by Ra, and we also have Vp by Va is equal to 1 plus E by 1 minus E. So using these two formulas we can calculate and we can find out. If you calculate it, I will not go into derivation. Mu by A 1 plus E by 1 minus E. So you can calculate directly if you know the mu. Mu is actually mu is a very simple thing. Mu is actually given by this formula, what is called, I will give you the expression for mu. G, capital G, universal gravitation constant, m1 plus m2. In this case, mu is this one. So if you know mass of both the objects, if you know the gravitational constant is always known to you, so you know mu, you know the aphelion, means semi-major axis, and if you know the eccentricity, you can calculate the velocity. So if you know this velocity from this formula, you can calculate the other velocity at aphelion. And for any particular instant, you can calculate the velocity of constant here, and then you can calculate the velocity at any particular instant using integral equation. So once you know these things, you can calculate many things. So that is the beauty of this thing. Okay. So this is there. So let me move on to the some more. Few slides are there. So this we have done. Now. Now these all things we have velocity in the orbit and all we have already seen how it situation, how is it like. Then two particular things I will just discuss. One is that we will not formulate anything because formulation takes time. So what is an Hoffman orbit? Hoffman orbit is the minimum energy orbit that is required to transfer a satellite from one particular orbit to another. See, imagine that two orbits. In first orbit it is moving. This is an idealistic case actually. In the first orbit it is moving in a circular. This is the first orbit. It is moving initially, and we want to move this. For example, it is moving in a around the Earth, and we want to make it around the moons or around some other thing where it will be captured by the moon or something like that. So this is the second orbit where we have to send it, so that we will fire the rocket here, so that its magnitude doesn't change but its direction only change, and we will make the firing will be such that the amount of thrust produced will be forming an conic orbit, in the sense that forming a parabolic orbit whose twice the major axis is the distance between the aphelion at that particular point of injection, where the another otherwise if you just leave it, actually the orbit will close again like that. So object will start moving. Here you have to fire once more to get it into other orbit. So this is the aphelion position and this is the perihelion position. So we have to fire it so that it moves from perihelion to aphelion, and the at a elliptic orbit whose twice the major axis is given by this particular distance. So this is called an Hoffman transfer orbit, where a particular orbit of parabola elliptic orbit has to be defined in this particular way. Of course we can calculate the parameters, so those things are always there. So that is one thing. Similarly we have that is a transfer orbit, but in this case, as I said you, that for capturing or capturing the situation, this is the problem. We have to define it. Initially it will be in one orbit, and we have to make a particular elliptic orbit to move into the other orbit, and it goes on like that. So these all can be formulated. They are not very difficult things. So with this I think I will conclude it, and if you have any particular problem, you can always ask me. Where is the thing? Yeah. Ask me. Yeah. Open your videos. You can ask me directly. We can answer whatever it is. Yeah. Tell me. Can you tell me a bit louder, clearer, so that I can't hear it? Or you can put it in the chat box also. Or you speak out what you want to speak. What? Anything? Tell me. What do you want to know? Any questions? What I am, it is not clear. Can you just tell me once more, or you type it? Can you type it in the chat box so that I come to know about it? All of you can type the question so that I can read it also. So we have basically today we have actually started with a basic formulation of what is dynamical system, what is dynamics, the study of dynamics, and then in space dynamics actually we are concerned with the motion of satellites, motion of planets around. So basically in the most idealistic case, though it is not, it can be just as an approximation, we have taken and formulated the two body problem, that is Earth Moon or say satellite Earth, like that two body problem, and we have seen that how actually scientists formulate that problem and what type of equations they get, and then there are methods to solve, and we have solved it for any particular cases because we didn't go much into the calculus. In fact, I didn't do the derivation because it will take a lot of time. So and you may not be able to online follow also that if I do it happen in the full load here and there. So that is one thing. So somebody has said, sir, what is Hoffman orbit used in Mangala, and which was the Hoffman orbit for any planetary system, actually any space travel or any type of thing, the minimum, because that is the minimum energy orbit, so that has to be used. Okay, so in the Chandrayaan first mission, you remember that it was taken in a successive orbit. It was not done in a single shot, it was done in an incremental shot. First it was taken in a bigger ellipse and then it was taken. So it depends on what type of strategy we use, what type of techniques a particular space station is used. So in that way it is done. So either incrementally it is done, but each of the thing is that the total energy should be minimum. So if the at a single, many of the US satellites they use a single Hoffman thing, but in our case we find it more reliable to use successive incrementation. So that is there. So do planets form the perihelion to aphelion, not vice versa? See, perihelion, it depends, aphelion and perihelion, it is not about the direction. Direction of a planet depends on its initial dynamical condition. Okay, so for example, any satellite which moves along the rotation of the Earth is called prograde satellite. Any satellite which moves opposite to the rotation, retrograde satellite. So that is all there. That depends on what form we are sending, what is the use of that satellite and all those things. So perihelion is a concept which is just the minimum distance from the primary to the point on the orbit, minimum distance in the orbit, and aphelion is the farthest. So that is the definition of perihelion and aphelion. So satellites move from perihelion to aphelion or aphelion to perihelion. So in one cycle it will move from perihelion to aphelion, in second cycle it will move from aphelion to perihelion. Okay, any other questions? No, it is not possible to have two planets in the same satellite, because then first of all that will not be classified as a planet, and in long course actually the planet may due to some type of dissipation in long run it may have some obstruction and ultimately it may destroy, or it may collide with some other object, or among them it may disintegrate. So normally in our solar system, by definition itself, you know, a planet's definition is that it should have cleared its orbit, it should move around a star, it should be have attained hydrostatic equilibrium in the sense that it should be spherical in shape, and its orbit should not have any other object, then only it is classified as a planet. So by definition itself that is ruled out, but physically also that doesn't happen. Okay, any other thing? So why doesn't planet revolve in circular orbit? So why a circular orbit, why does it revolve? Circular is a particular case. For example, you know that Earth's moon's orbit around Earth is a elliptic orbit, but ellipticity is very less. Okay, but Pluto's orbit around Sun is a highly elliptic orbit. So or Uranus orbit or Neptune's orbit is an elliptic orbit. So it depends on initial parameters, it depends on the mass, and it depends on the dynamical situations. But any object can go in any other object in a circular orbit also. But mostly it is seen that since the object are macroscopic, not point object, it doesn't come as a it doesn't come in the scenario of circular orbits. So you can have it. So that is the reason most of the astronomical orbits are elliptical orbits. I will give you, this presentation was based on a particular book which is particular, you will find the chapters in the book. It is called Principles of Astronomy. by so you can refer to this book. There are chapters on this two body problem, many body problem, so you can do it, but I don't know whether we can post it in some classroom, because there is no general classroom for this. So I think sharing slides will become a difficult affair. There so many things are there. We have done it as a general talk. So anyway, all this whatever we have discussed is present in this particular book. You can always take this Principles of Astronomy by Roy and Clark. That is the book. You can refer to that book. Okay. Are there planetary system with stars at both the foci? No. It can be in either of the one foci. It can't be at both the foci. So, so it doesn't become a two-body problem. First of all, when you have many objects in the same scenario, we spoke about two-body problems. It's a multi-body complicated problem. Okay, so thanks to all of you for having been for this particular session. I hope that something you have understood and you've enjoyed how to apply dynamical systems and how to solve. So read more about it, try to do a lot of more problems, try to get fluent with it, and best wishes for all of you. Thank you very much.